This is Maharajas of Scale, a podcast where we go behind the scenes and talk to founders who are demolishing the myths around building and scaling a big business in India. These are the stories that have shattered the assumptions around Indian consumers and are changing the game completely. I am Krishna serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Flit, the fashion locator in town, and startup mentor, bringing you these stories. Good afternoon, everyone. Thursday afternoon, sunny afternoon in Bangalore, and then Ashish and Amrita from IndWealth, an amazing company. I've been doing a lot of research about them. I think it's fascinating what they're working with. They are still, for some meaningful jargon, they're throwing AI and ML for HNIs and that kind of stuff, but we'll get to the bottom of it. But I suspect that our session today is going to be very different from the ones that we've had in the past, because we have to do justice to what Ashish has done from his time at Times Internet and being Google's first country manager for India, and then the GoIbibo group, and then GoIbibo Travel, and the $2 billion exit with Make My Trip, and then now IndWealth. Wow, Ashish, your entire resume, if I may call it that, or career, reads like a legendary one and a storied one, and literally like a juggernaut. So take us through that a little bit. And from DPS Mathura to INSAID, looks like you check all the boxes.
Yeah, I mean, look. So, firstly, nothing. Let me be honest. Nothing is deliberate out of that. It's all quite evolutionary.
Seems quite good. That's very humble of you to say that. You can't get to where you got to, Ashish, without being deliberate and then focused, isn't it? But I'm sorry to cut you, but go on.
Yeah, look, so, I come from a very humble middle class background. Okay, so definitely coming from a background which is humble, you are definitely more driven. This is, I kind of grew up in the country where the country was just kind of taking off. Liberalization was just beginning to happen. Foreign companies were coming in. The world was changing. The exposure, the country was getting connected. Internet was just happening. And all of this combination of exposure and the desire to create an impact, led me to do many experiments in my life in many aspects of that evolutionary journey that I talk about, which is what I think. I think had it been very deliberate that, listen, I want to go to a college. I want to do an MBA. By the way, after the college, I did not do an MBA. The management, most of my further education happened only after several years of work. Okay,
which is actually the right way to do it, to be honest.
Perhaps, I don't know. So again, that was evolutionary. It was not like, listen, I wanted to do something, and at that time, I said I don't want to do further education. I remember even fresh out of school, I got into Delhi College of Engineering, which now is called, I think, DTU or DEIT or something of that sort. That time it was called DCE. And I said, listen, I don't want to do engineering. And here I am running businesses which are based on computer science. So all I want to say is that it was quite evolutionary during the journey. One very interesting thread across the journey is that I always liked creating, building stuff. I mean, I hated being a passenger. For example, when I joined Google, for me, the high was, setting up the flag in India for them. But what I hated is that at an overall scheme of things, I was a small little cog in the wheel, like a passenger sitting here in India, which was like contributing decimal point of revenue to their overall revenue, and not being able to really feel that I'm making a difference to the customers or to the community at large. Because as you know, most of companies like Google, Facebook products are made out of the Silicon Valley. So the common thread for me that took me through was that I want to do stuff where I can really impact people's lives, where I can really change people's lives. I can better people's lives, whether it is today's date financial services, or was it travel earlier, or payments. It was all about creating impact, making a difference, building stuff from scratch. So that's what got me going, and that's what keeps me going every day. It's the drive to express by creating impact.
That's put very succinctly, but let's dig in a little bit. After DPS, then you said you got into Delhi College of Engineering. And
no, so I didn't do DCE. I did economics. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I mean. I didn't go to the engineering line.
You didn't? Oh, okay.
Most technology entrepreneurs they do basically computer science engineering or any other form of engineering.
Okay.
I didn't come from a background of engineering, right? And here I am running so many startups. So all I'm saying is that a lot of it was evolutionary during this journey. It was all about what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy.
So let's talk about that educational career a little bit. So Delhi School of Economics, was it?
No, Kirori Mal College.
Okay. And then what was your first job?
So my first job was with a music channel called MTV.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That was my first job. And subsequently, I joined TIL, which is India Times.
Right.
I exited to do my further education, and I came back. And then after that, I joined Google.
So you were with MTV around the same time Mahesh Murthy was there?
No, this is after that. This is an era after that.
Okay. And then Times Internet, these were still early days. I guess Times, given their size and given their media reach, they still have their hands everywhere. Was it the case back then as well?
Absolutely. So the internet division was run by Vineet Jain, one of the promoters / owners of the group himself. Right. Very, very passionate guy. And I got an opportunity to work very closely with him. During that journey, and it's not well written about and well documented, during that journey, I worked very closely with a guy called Rajesh Sahani, who's the founder of GSF. GSF is an accelerator. And it's very less written about, but we actually, back in 2001, when there was just really poor internet in the country, when there was actually mostly dial-up and there was some bit of DSL stuff happening, we innovated by launching the first travel auctions in the country. We launched the first reverse price auctions. It's just not written about. It's just not documented anywhere. I of course have some documents which I will one day bring together and put it. But these were the early innovations which we thought that we are absolutely up to a very, very exciting game. It's just that during that journey, having created that, I kind of temporarily exited for education and then came back. But by the time I came back, that foreign education gave me this global exposure, globally what's happening. And I said, look, one needs to learn much more. And I then exited and joined Google. And of course, joining Google was itself an experience because you get interviewed by like 18 people over a week in Mountain View. That itself was an amazing experience and quite a daunting experience. But that's how the whole journey happened till Google.
Very interesting. So anything you want to elaborate on the Times Internet time when this reverse auction in travel, was that a precursor to what you eventually did? While GoIbibo was not really reverse auction, but you're not the first person to try reverse auction. It's a fascinating concept. I guess at scale, the closest that we've seen is really Groupon. And the funny thing is, a lot of people don't know that Bill Gates co-founder Paul Allen, after he became a billionaire, he actually tried his hand at a reverse auction company, and then it didn't go anywhere. But that was way back in 1999, which was still early days for internet. So was that a precursor?
So first is so travel was an auction platform, not a reverse auction.
Oh, okay.
Classic English Dutch auction. I mean, this is the time when I really started understanding the concepts of dynamic pricing and inventory. But the travel auction was, if you go back, we in fact launched the travel auction system. And typically became the largest domestic transaction system for travel. Make My Trip didn't even at that time do domestic travel. They used to do travel for NRIs. And the concept was that those days, there was no concept of GDS and middle booking systems.
Right.
So we created a pseudo yield management pricing engine for, there used to be these airlines called Sahara, Indian Airlines.
Right.
Indian Airlines was separate from India. So Sahara, Indian Airlines and Jet. So we created these systems which enabled consumers to bid for a group of seats and compete for those seats. And I remember day one when we launched, we sold 10 tickets. And in 10 days, we were selling every day almost 2,000 tickets a day. Okay, during that time when the denominator, which is internet penetration, is very weak. So it became a massive hit. In fact, that reminds me, I must collect that documentation because it was really indigenous what we did. I mean, there was no parallel of that. So that's what we did with travel as a category. Of course, the world changed after I exited Times Internet. The world changed. GDSs came in, Amadeus, Galileo, Navitaire, etc. And I think Times Internet tried to move in a domestic system, just like a Make My Trip or a GoIbibo. It was not able to leapfrog to that. But that was one of the categories which we built, which was really, really amazingly successful. And there was no concept of negative unit economics, by the way. So there was revenue made on every ticket sold. So I mean, we didn't understand negative unit economics at all. That was something quite new to me also in the madness of 2011, 2012. The other system that we built was a very interesting system. It was a online shopping system, but not with a fixed price, with a reverse auction system. So the categories were largely consumer durables, commoditized consumer durables, and those days mobiles were also largely commoditized. The concept was very simple. It was called Tell Your Price. It was motivated because I was doing travel, so I was obviously motivated with Priceline, Name Your Price. So obviously I had understood what Priceline does, but it was called Tell Your Price. So consumers were supposed to say, so we would say, hey, here's an air conditioner, 1.5 ton air conditioner. In the market, this air conditioner sells for 22,000 rupees. Air conditioners used to be a very expensive product. So here's a television, flat screen television. In the market, this product is for 24,000. You tell your price. Okay. So you would tell your price, and we would say that if whatever price you've told, we will basically, if we price match, we'll ship the product to you. The consumers had to authenticate the credit cards, just like the way you have to do it on a Netflix. So those days, Indian entities were allowed to authenticate and pre-authenticate and charge. In India now, it's a pretty big challenge because of 3D Secure. So the way it used to work is that consumers would bid for that air conditioner. Consumers would tell their price for that air conditioners. The manufacturers like LG, Samsung, Whirlpool, they would bid for that demand. And it was just completely amazing. I mean, the amount of traction we got with, the system becoming, and there was no mobile apps those days. There was no mobile web. It was all desktop web.
Right.
And typically for me, the big learning was you give value to the consumers, they will come to the system somehow or the other, right? They will come. You give value, you basically make something valuable, they will figure out. Again, that was like our take at how e-commerce should be done for consumer products and consumer durables. I wonder why no one did that again. I have no answer because I never kind of delved into it. But again, something which was super interesting. I remember convincing LGs and Samsungs. So when I went to convince them, so I didn't say, listen, come and do a deal with me, give me X commission. Guess what I told them? So I went to LG. I met, and there's a guy called Salil Kapoor. I don't know if you know him. He's a pretty senior guy in the consumer electronic industry. He was previously the COO of DSTV. He's also a customer.
Voltas, yeah.
I shouldn't say this. And Voltas also, right? So I went and met Salil Kapoor. And I didn't say, listen, I want to do a deal with you. And I didn't go and educate to him what we want to do. I told him, listen, we want to buy 5,000 air conditioners. Tell me what price will you give me? So he gave me a price. Then I did the same thing with Samsung. The same thing with Whirlpool, same thing with Electrolux. I don't know if Electrolux is alive. So same thing with these 10, 20 consumer durable companies. And I realized that there are a lot of inefficiencies. And I started challenging them. Then I started telling them, okay, I want to buy. Will you customize the product? Because all of these guys had a dealer conflict issue. Give me a unique model. I think Amazon Basics does that now very well. Okay, give me a unique model. Give me a unique serial number, unique model. Make some change, and will you give me a unique value proposition? So they agreed, and then back to back, I went and collected demand. So I never gave them in advance. The minute I collected demand, then I started giving them purchase orders. Till then, they didn't know what the scheme is. I didn't give them a system where they should start bidding. Only when I had done 2 or 3 cycles, and they said, "Yaar, ye to bahut mota buyer hai," that I started to then ask them, "Listen, now you bid for these customers." Right. So it was pretty massive. I mean, I learned the 2-sided system, how this gets orchestrated. It was very exciting.
Interesting. Let's get to know Amrita a little bit as well. Amrita, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be where you are right now.
So basically, Ashish was one of my clients at HSBC. So most of my career I've spent with HSBC.
You can get into the frame a little.
Years with the bank.
Okay.
Yeah. So I spent like 15 years with the bank, and when he monetized with Make My Trip, that's when he started discussing the problems that were there in the wealth management space, and how advisory was not really to the true sense how it should be, and how ultra HNIs and HNIs are really struggling. And he's, like you've already seen, an expert in figuring out the broken pieces in any industry or in any market space. So that is when we started discussing of bringing IND money. And that's when, in fact, I went to some of my other UHNI and HNI clients to ask them that if we created something like this, and they were all unanimously of the view that this is the need of the hour. So what IND Money and IND Wealth today is doing is being really appreciated. And I think we created the product which was really required in the market.
So the perfect market research situation where, so Ashish, was it always your brainchild? This is something that you had up in your mind in IND Wealth?
No, so I think essentially it again comes from a problem statement, right? The problem statement of the broken pieces in the financial services sector, the fact that there is so much hidden and so much of losses being incurred by consumers and investors in India. The fact that people's financial lives are broken and strewn away everywhere. So it was a huge problem for me, people around me. And with that problem statement, when I started discussing with Amrita, I said, Amrita, listen, why are the banks not being able to solve it, right? Why can't you solve it? Or why is a private banking, non-banking setup also not solving it? What is the reason? And I figured why there are a lot of trail commissions from these kind of investment products, etc. And I realized that this is not an Excel problem. This is a data science problem, because there is so much of data, so much of data feeds, consumers' portfolios, market situations, all of that needs to get intersected. And I realized that this is really the need of the hour to build a personal finance app, which will bring people's finances in a single app and help them to manage day-to-day their money and do it transparently so that people can create better value for themselves. And that's how I started to work with Amrita and the team and start building it.
Yeah, I think there were multiple issues, right? Like transparency being one of the key. Like even today, a lot of customers don't even know the kind of expenses that they are paying for any holdings that they have with the banks, be it bonds, be it mutual funds, PMSs, AIFs. So that was something that was a really. And the other thing is the advisory was mostly driven by the commissions that a distributor is getting. So while they would call it advisory to say that we are advising you, and we are all guilty as bankers to do that. Like invariably, if there is a fund or who will come and say, I'll give you this much more if you distribute, it's easy for me to go and prove it to a client that this is the right thing to do, right? But if the moment you become commission free, then your motives are gone and you're actually doing the right thing and providing the right advice. And that is what IND Money is trying to change.
So I'll come to the IND angle a little bit. It's very fascinating. I'm sure we can talk hours on end about it. We can keep talking about what Monish Pabrai says, what Warren Buffett says, what Charlie Munger says, the transparency into the fee-based system, the misalignment of incentives, the lack of data, and given the size of the financial services industry, it is a behemoth of a problem that you've actually taken on, right? But Ashish, I want to go back to the post-Google days a little bit. Okay, I will come to the IND because I know that you both have a lot to contribute on the IND Wealth and the IND Money story. So before we get sidetracked with some of your past ventures, or rather I don't want that to be a sidetrack. Let's complete that part. And Morgan Housel has written this incredible book called The Psychology of Money, right? And in that book, he discusses how Charlie Munger once said there is actually a third partner of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger who's actually not that widely known at all. And for a certain period of time, he was Warren Buffett's, in fact, annual compounded growth rate is 22%. And I think Jim Simmons, there is another person whose compounded annual growth rate over a 20-year odd period is actually 66%, right? But the fact, what actually makes Warren Buffett's and Berkshire Hathaway's streak so formidable is that it's at around 22% for 4 to 5 decades, right? And then Charlie Munger actually has said this, and I'm using this not in the context of investment, but in the context of the time at Google. Compounding is a less understood science, and the most important thing that you need to do with compounding is not actually disturb it.
Yes.
Right. So with that, I know when you were at Google, you said you felt like you were a cog in the wheel. And I know that feeling. I've constantly in my life, I've chased positions in things where I felt I could make an impact. If I was one of 150,000 people, no matter how senior the position is, unless and until I'm at the top of the pyramid, my ability to make an impact is really limited, right? But having seen what has today become, what Google has become today, not just globally, but even in India, do you regret that you left it at a time and maybe you should have stuck around, and maybe that compounding effect that Charlie Munger refers to with investments would have happened here as well?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm so glad that I took that decision, because I think the thrill of building on your own and being able to create systems, platforms, applications, and impacting the lives of people around you, that feeling is absolutely of a different level altogether. I'm not even talking economics out here, right? Simple. I think it's an intangible high, and I'm glad that I took that decision at the right time.
So then,
everything is about timing, right?
Sure.
Everything is about timing. You can't obviously focus too much of timing, but if I now do a back test on that timing, I think it was the best call I took, right? I feel so excited having created such ubiquitous products like GoIbibo, PayU, and even we acquired Redbus. So really, I mean, there are very few people who get this opportunity to build such ubiquitous brands. It's very hard to build consumer businesses, and I feel very glad to have taken that decision.
True. I'll come to that. The fact that you've built so many consumer brands, and it's no ordinary feat that you have done that, right? So then from Google on to GoIbibo Group, which was essentially an incubator way back at that time.
Correct.
And then how did the evolution to that being a travel portal happen?
Yeah, so essentially when I when I decided to exit Google, my decision was to start an incubator, because during my journey I was always involved in doing multiple products, multiple categories, multiple products. And one of the things that I saw when I was in the Valley, there is so much of innovation and so much of production happening. So many people would sit in cafes and somebody's talking about an idea around making direct to consumer coffee platform. Somebody's talking about health medicines platform. Somebody's saying, let me solve this problem of assistance. So many people are solving so many problems. And if you see back in 2007 in India, most of the creator economy, which is, let's say, developers, were talking about, oh, can I get into Infosys? Can I get into TCS? So that was there were just no startups in India at that time. If, let's say, you wanted to put 100 crore rupees in India, you just had Shadi and BharatMatrimony.com, you had Rediff.com, okay, and you had Naukri.com. You didn't have any other startups at that time,
right?
So there was just not so. What I at that time decided that I will create startups. When there are no startups, I'll create startups, and that's why the theme of incubator. And I got the incubation money from Naspers that time, and that was the idea. But while building that incubator, I built several little applications. GoIbibo was another experiment which took off, and it took off beautifully because of many reasons. We can discuss. That's a long story, separate story. And basically, we decided to transform the company from an incubator to a proper company. And that we did in 2009 end, around 2009 and 2010. And then when I did that, I was facing a lot of problems, and it's deja vu because I'm facing the same problems now, which is with payments. So I started wiring up direct integrations with banks to solve the payment problem, and hence built Ibibo Pay, which later we rebranded as PayU, which we started giving it to third-party merchants. So that's how the evolution of GoIbibo and PayU happened. And that's how the whole transformation happened.
Incredible. So now, having exited GoIbibo in 2017, and now with what's happening with COVID, again, do you think in hindsight, looking at it, that it was an incredible decision and great timing? Although it's not really back to back, that COVID's not exactly happened back to back. But do you think that was a well-timed decision as well?
Yeah, look, I think so. After the exit, which was quite a celebrated exit and quite a celebrated transaction in the market, for that time it was the largest transaction. For today, it's the second largest consumer tech transaction. The first one being Flipkart and Walmart. This is the second largest so far, which of course is a very defining moment because it communicates to the world that there's value to be created in India. So having exited, and firstly, the choice of exit, absolutely, really happy that I took that decision, because for me, feeling good and feeling excited about creating impact and building is really important. That's what I do, and that's what I want to do in the future. And I think from a timing perspective, beautiful, because COVID has, if at all, accelerated our growth. COVID, if at all, has actually really significantly helped us to scale our platform without investing, because people really want, at this stage, personal finance platforms to digitize their financial life. They want digital execution platforms. So I think there is a huge need for people to have their virtual digital family offices in the cloud. So I think COVID has been a pretty interesting trigger for us.
I meant COVID in the context of travel, what the wreckage, the travel industry.
Okay. No, so okay. So my view is that that's kind of a short-lived phenomena, because in any case, if you look at it, the use case for travel apps like GoIbibo is leisure and small businesses. The business use case is in any case still not moved so fast onto online or pure play online. So I think the leisure travel and all of that is going to be back very soon, right? So a lot of people said, wow, great timing that you exited, right? Because these travel is kind of devastated. But you look at booking.com, right? It's back. The market cap of booking.com is back with a vengeance, right? Make My Trips stock price is pulling back, for example. I'm personally going to Goa this New Year's. Amrita is going also for New Year somewhere. So we are traveling back, right? So that's just beginning to happen. So I just feel it's kind of short-lived, and there would be, the use case of travel for you to go back home, for you to do leisure travel is going to be back. There's going to be impact for, I think, for a period for business travel, for sure.
Yeah.
But then the travel companies will also need to reorient themselves and see how do they provide more services to certain consumers, etc., etc.
And I think that'll be made up because of the vengeance next year.
Yeah.
I think people are going to travel a lot more.
Yeah.
So
Revenge travel.
yes.
Yeah. But having said that, there would be impact on business travel.
Right.
I think 5 stars will be impacted. The use case of conferences and meetings, that's going to be hit definitely. And I think it's very clear that now we all realize that something which we can do like this,
Yes.
Why do we need to travel? So business travel will have an impact.
Yeah, the world has changed.
That world has changed, and that's not coming back in my view.
So for a humble middle-class boy to go to Times Internet, become the first country head of Google, and then land 100 crore Naspers fund to create an incubator, $2 billion, and run it for some time, do a $2 billion exit. What's the secret sauce, Ashish? It's not just evolution. There is something. Is it about how you parlay yourself? Is it about how you make the right connections? Is it about knowing who to work with? Or is it, if you just tell me it's all just about, I was just at the right place at the right time, that'll be I will not believe you for a second.
No, I won't say that, right? So, I would, in general, so what you right now captured were the happy milestones. Right? So you basically, let's say it's a timeline.
Yeah, sure.
From day 0 to, let's say, day 100.
Yeah, chronology. Yeah.
Okay. You have basically cherry picked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've not picked many milestones which are horrible in that journey, right?
I'm all ears.
Okay. So the issue is that I think so that everybody will face bad days every day, right? So typically, like I would hear 7 bad things and 3 good things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I would face 9 bad things and only experience 1 really good thing. So I think we're missing a lot of in that timeline. There are really, really, really bad periods, right? Where things
talk about it.
Yeah, look. So where do I start, right? Because the milestones that you picked up are like 6 or 7. Those will be like 600 of them, right? In those 3,000 days.
Invert it and actually destroy my hypothesis completely and say, hey, you're glossing over all of these that happened, and then give 10 equally, using the Newtonian law of reverse motion, destroy my hypothesis. Feel free to do it.
Yeah, look, let me start with the last, right? So firstly, the fact is that everybody, so if you look at the whole, let me start with the GoIbibo thing, right? So we did the exit, but you do the exit because you are, you have many variables running around you, right?
Sure.
And this is the time you were like hands-on winning. You say that, listen, I'm seizing the moment, right? I could actually typically do a reverse acquisition, okay? But we didn't go through that because of circumstances, right? So while it seems really, it's great, right? Obviously, the job of an entrepreneur is to give back returns to people, etc. All done. But if you ask me personally, it's an unfinished business, honestly, right? I mean, really getting consumer brands to become ubiquitous, liked and loved in a short span of time is really hard. And then you want to seize the moment, and you're about to seize the moment, but you change the direction. So while it sounds so rosy from the outside, when you ask me, for me, it's like, okay, it's an unfinished business, right? So that's one example I want to give you.
So when you say
unfinished business, I think we could have taken this to another crescendo altogether. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not, so do I feel like, wow, that, my job was done? Answer is no. Okay.
Right. So then I'm thinking there were certain investors that wanted an out, and
not investors. It's just circumstances, right? Like we had a service tax raids happening, lots of such issues, right? For that we had, which kind of got us into a circumstance which said that, listen, and of course certain investor alignment and so on and so forth. So it's complicated, right? There are multiple things at play, right? It's the game is very, very much like you're playing and you don't have the time to see 1,000 things, right? So there are multiple things happening at the same time and you need to make your choices.
Right.
So that's one example I want to give you, right? The other thing is that during the whole journey of IBIBO to GoIbibo, which is incubated, we saw so much of exciting stuff, and we learned so much from failures. We saw so much of little failures, which I think my learning from that is that, I think I'm thick-skinned. And being thick-skinned, I don't get scared of failure. I said, okay, let's move on, right? Let's keep moving on. And some of it is documented, perhaps some of it is not even documented, but we tried many things as part of that incubator. Now, travel was one of many things which took off. It was really law of averages taking off, and an industry which I kind of understood really well, personally passionate about, right? So that's the second part of the journey. And I mean, again, there could be many such cases. So I think at least people like me, we've seen more failures. We see more bad days. We see more failures. We see worse things and all kinds of situations simultaneously. So I think the secret is to be thick-skinned and just be resilient, right? You got to just be resilient. You got to be strong stomached about it, right? During this journey. I think that's the secret.
You also course correct very quickly.
Yeah, same thing.
Is something that like he'll figure out gaps and he'll course correct quickly, which I think is not something that everybody can do.
Which is the iterative process, right? And so because you don't know, right? And at times you will look at data says something, but intuition, and you'll intersect data and intuition. But long story short, I think the word I would like to use it's quite a lot to do with resilience and being thick-skinned and being at it and not being stupid, right? Okay, if you're failing, then cut your losses and just fail, right? And celebrate that failure,
right?
Learn from that failure and then move to the next, right? And there'll be some large failures. There'll be many failures, right? During the journey.
Yeah.
So I've started, right now I'm doing my 6th startup, and I know that this is going to be the one, and this is going to go places. And the funny thing is, in the 5 that I've done in the past, 2 have taken off and 2 haven't. They haven't really been the kind of exits, and there is a lot of unfinished business like you talked about. But the funny thing is, before I started this 6th one, I started doing something like a hacking of my mind, right? I started telling myself, what if what we are thinking is good is actually bad, and the things that we are actually perceiving as bad is really good. Okay. There is a very old Indian film called Devdas, which is Dilip Kumar, and so the original version is actually a Telugu version. And one of the lyrics of that, when he's there is this character called Paro, right? So Dilip Kumar is longing for Paro, and one of the lyrics of that song is when he's pining for her, he's drunk and then he's pining for her. He says, the essence of all the Vedas and all the spiritual things is this, that you interpret difficulty as comfort. The day you understand that equation, life is going to be awesome with you, right? So what I've done over the last year or so is everything that an entrepreneur thinks about, saying, okay, kuch nahi ho raha hai. Okay, this is awesome. And we tried this. This isn't working. This is awesome. So I've started hacking my mind, and resilience. I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs talk about resilience. Adam Grant talks about resilience, Plan B, and stuff like that. The hidden side of it is you're still thinking that is something bad, and therefore you need to steel yourself for it, right? And then what I've done is I've inverted it, and I'm telling myself, no, don't even think about these as being bad. This actually means that this is good. When everything is happening and then there is hardly any things that are blowing back, then you're not being challenged, and therefore there's not much that you're learning. So I've sort of inverted that. Perhaps you are saying almost the same thing in a different language. But what I find fascinating, Ashish, is the reverse auction platform, the group booking platform, group bidding auction platform, and then GoIbibo, and the law of averages, meaning you tried so many experiments at IBIBO group before travel took off. And then the pay you, everything looks like, in your mind, it looks like it's evolutionary and you created something for the moment when you had the need for it. But for me, creating this, and you teach about user acquisition, organic versus paid and stuff like that, it just tells me that innately you know a bunch of things about how to create and grow businesses. And we'll come to, now I think we'll make a segue into that. So if you could take a few moments and summarize that. Not a lot of people in India know that, right? When you spoke about the negative unit economics in the early 2010s, negative unit economics exists only in a state where you are flush with capital, where you can even incur that negative unit economics, right? When you're actually challenged for capital, there is no way you can even incur negative unit economics because there's just no capital to incur that negative. So only when you're so excessively funded, or maybe, the reasons it can be excessive or whatever, you can dip into that capital funding and then realize that negative. So what this tells me is that you are someone with this understanding, and the beauty of what you're doing in my mind is that you've been there around the dot-com bubble. You've been there in the early 2000s and early 2010s. Your experience really spawns, and then you still continue, you still seem to be growing things. So what is it that that is so different, and how have you parlayed that into IndWealth? Because IndWealth was you raised your seed round in 2018, and you got operational in mid 2019 or maybe early 2019, and then you blazed a trail. Although as an outsider, the seed round has helped in your customer acquisition is what I would think. So if you could take those two separate topics and address that'd be great.
So to understand the question, you want to you're asking that how am I synthesizing my decade journey to build these things? Is that the question?
What I have seen in India is there are a handful of entrepreneurs, not really more than a handful, that understand how to attract large users, build large user bases. Anybody can burn through a lot of capital and do that. And then there is possibly not a lot of, other than good connections and then landing that kind of capital, there isn't too much intelligence involved there, right? But what you have done is phenomenal. From those platforms to IBIBO, you have built user bases from the grounds up into millions of users. That tells me that you understand the user psyche and the psychology of building user bases rather innately. What is it that you understand about that? And how are you parlaying that into what you are doing with IndWealth?
Sure. So look, So there are two spaces, right? One space, whenever I think about this, so I like to put myself in the shoes of a customer. Very first principles. I don't like to go into too much of deep theory, but first is I put myself into the shoes of the customer. What is he pained with? Mm-hmm. Now there could be services which are already there in the market, 100 services. Like there were, when we launched travel, there were hundreds of travel sites. But why did I launch travel site? Because I as a customer was pained, my friends were pained. They would try to book, and when they're checking out, they would get an unreliable experience. The fares would fluctuate. They won't get their e-ticket in their hands. It was just unreliable. A very, very unreliable system. It's just like in e-commerce. There were a lot of e-commerce sites before Flipkart and Amazon, by the way. Lots, hundreds. It's just that when I would place an order on those e-commerce sites, those products would never deliver. They would come after 21 days, 30 days, 40 days. Again, let's say when I would do cancel an air ticket or cancel a product, I would get my refund after 2 months. So this whole transaction system in the country was broken for a long time. And when we launched GoIbibo, we said, listen, can we basically do a couple of things? Can we decide what not to do? But to do certain things, to do them really well, so that these very big pain areas get solved. People laughed. The Make My Trip team laughed at us. I know it. The Clear Trip team, everybody laughed at us. Yaar, ek aur travel company launch kar rahe hain log. And that too with a very weird name called GoIbibo, doesn't make any sense. So everybody laughed at us. But to what I said to myself and the team, listen, there is a pain, right? The search results do not load fast enough. Most of the people are in 2009 are still dialing up and calling up these Make My Trips of the world to book the tickets. And we said that, listen, we will like to only do online booking and we like to do it reliably. So that's the first thing that we did, which helped us to start beginning to get embraced by a few set of users. Same problem statement with PayU, right? Like we had a payment system, we were using a payment system, third-party payment system. It had a failure rate of 60%, 40%. We said we need to solve this problem. So in all of this, the consumer was put right at the center always, right? How do we deliver a service which is better, more reliable? How do we deliver a better consumer experience, right? Essentially, how do we improve conversion rates? If you look at in metric, how do we improve success rates? So that was the genesis of whatever we do and whatever we are doing now. That listen, how do we basically in the current business, how do we ensure that consumers get zero commission investing? How do we ensure that the consumers are able to track all their money in a single place without doing any effort automatically, right? So just to deliver a consumer experience which is disproportionately better than what they get otherwise. So that's the first principle part of it, where I believe that me and the team needs to eat the dog food while doing it and eat it a lot, right? Even if it's bad. And more you eat the dog food, more service you better the service you make. Of course, in the journey, you have to decide what not to do. Like, for example, we decided hundreds of things not to do. Like we had decided not to do television commercials, as an example. On the other hand, we said we will build our own viral loops. So we launched something called Go Contacts. We said, can we basically create virality loops between the consumers? So that was always the second part of the theme while I was building that. Listen, a lot of these systems are one-sided. How do we make them two-sided? How do we connect supply and demand? And number two, how do we create loops between consumers? So that was the other thinking. And again, I'm obviously translating a lot of that philosophy and thinking into the current startup also, that how do we build those loops? How do we build virality? And not just need to do normal AdWords or television ads, right? We don't want to do that kind of stuff to increase reach. Because doing all of that is very linear growth, but creating virality and viral loops just is non-linear, right? So suddenly you wake up and you say, oh, your registrations have increased by 5 times and your monthly active users have increased because you build these viral loops. They're hard to orchestrate. So in general, what I'm saying on the second one is this whole understanding of is very important as to how do you orchestrate network effects between the two sides and between consumers. And these are not that strong. They're not like an Instagram type of network effects or a Snapchat kind. They are weak, but building these network effects and loops always helps you to disproportionately deliver value to the consumers and grow. So to an example, today's date, we have a concept of customer acquisition cost. Where does that cost go? That cost goes to third-party platforms like Google, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Can I move that half of the customer acquisition cost into building these viral loops? So marketing for me is not marketing, it's actually technology and product, essentially. So that's been the common theme, essentially, besides, of course, being like, today's date, I personally service customers. I will personally go and talk to the customers. Amrita talks. We talk to customers. Everybody, engineers should talk to the customers. That customer madness and obsession that has to be there, combined with this concept of paranoia, in a positive sense. That listen, if you don't do this, then heavens are going to fall, right? So these are some of the things. I'm just thinking on the fly. Don't have all of this documented, but these are some of the things that I would typically practice to synthesize my learnings and then translate into whatever you do.
Interesting. Have you made your big pot of gold yet from any of the exits?
I wouldn't say, big is a very, let's say that I'm comfortable.
Okay. So let's talk about the seed round for IndWealth. For what you... But before we talk about the seed round, we've had CAMS, CAMS, right? Computer Age Management Systems.
Yes.
For reasonably well-informed investors, they would know that CAMS has been doing a reasonably good job of providing a single snapshot of all of their investments. Is it great? I wouldn't possibly say so, because I've used their services for more than a decade. And in a sea of zero options, CAMS definitely does a decent job of providing that single window. But does it do what IndWealth does? I don't think close. But on the back of the heels of their successful IPO, right? So that just shows that there is a demand for things like that. So, but from travel to go on to this, and when you started into a 2018 robo-advisory, for instance, while you are not completely robo-advisory platforms had taken off in the US, and a lot of Indian firms were aping the same thing, right? What was the context in which you theorized that something of this, was it again a scratch your own itch where you had a similar problem and therefore you decided to do IndWealth, or what was the hypothesis?
Yeah, it was basically problem statement, right? It was the first principle problem. Mm-hmm. Typically, let's say as a user, I had invested through multiple entities, multiple intermediaries who were charging me a lot of money from the back end. I had typically India now has 2 crore unique investors only. And of approximately out of that, about 1.2 crore are mutual fund investors, and about, or let's say half are mutual, or there'll be an overlap, but let's say 2 crore unique investors.
Right.
Most of the stock investors have 2 or 3 accounts in the market. Nobody has one single exclusive account, because typically the person will open an account with a discount broker, the person opens an account with the bank. Right. So someone like me has 4 stockbroking accounts. At an average, it's about a 2.5. Okay. So you have multiple stockbroking accounts. Then you also have your pension or EPF account. So you have all of these multiple accounts and expenses. So you have assets and liabilities. And I would have all of these guys like IFL and all come to me and say, listen, we'll solve this problem for you. We'll create a family office for you. We'll do this. And I would be very excited. That'll be great, right? If you can track my financial life, because it's very hard for me to do it on a spreadsheet because I can't keep updating it. And so with that, I realized nobody's solving it. At best, there were a lot of systems out there which again asked me to do another. We said, how do we automate it? how do we completely automate it, right? We shouldn't need anyone to be doing data entry unless it's real estate and we don't have any solution. But for people's financial life, their expenses, their loans, their savings, their deposits, we should just automate mutual funds, automate the thing. And so that was the first big problem that we started thinking. I looked at a lot of companies across the world, couldn't really find a single parallel. That there was something called Mint in US, there was some similarities. But then I also realized that I don't want to leave it to just saying that, okay, you organize your financial life and it's done. Then we want to also tell the users, how can the user improve his financial life, right? So how should you allocate, at what time? What should you? So we were the first ones to actually launch in 2019 last year, the whole concept of rebalancing, right? Switch from A to B, because we did our whole machine learning system does scoring, etc., which has been really valuable. As you've seen that there has been so many defaults which have happened in the market. Our engines started alerting users about the Franklin default 6 months before, and this is just a year one startup, right? And that was just based on very linear machine learning rules, very linear system, and lots of people saved hundreds of crores who exited. And that was, again, not just helping you organize your money, but also helping you take actions to save your money, to grow your money. So all of these were like massive problems which were not served. So this is a space where it's not that there are several players who's solving it, but may not be solving it well, may not be executing. This is a space which is completely empty. Nobody was kind of solving it. Unlike travel, where there were many people solving, but not solving well enough. Hence, that gave me a window to come in. So that's what got me going, and that's what got me to. I remember speaking to Amrita and said, "Listen, how will people trust us to put money with us, right? Because giving people cash back is very easy, or somebody transacting something for 2,000-3,000 rupees is very easy. But how does that happen?" So a lot of psychological thinking, etc. And yeah, here we are with a product which is growing very fast.
So how has user growth been ever since you've launched?
So look, I mean, you obviously we launched between April and July last year. So the users was zero. Right. And for me to compare is wrong. But all I can say is that from the pandemic to now, our user base has grown by almost 18 to 20 times. So the growth has been quite overwhelming, actually.
Any numbers you can share?
Not at this stage, but let's put it this way, that we were just looking at this very interesting data of under the finance category of iOS apps, and we're already now one of the top ranked apps, despite being the newest players. But we are already one of the top iOS apps in the finance category, for example, which goes to show, because if you look at ranking, is done based on engagement and reach. So ahead of many of those robo-advisors that you talk about, I think just about very close to Paytm Money, which is a mass product, very different product. So we are like, I think in the overall finance category, ranked 35, 36, Paytm is 34, something like that. But ahead of, let's say, ET Money, which is Economic Times, by the way.
Right.
And much mass users, right? So ahead of ET Money, ahead of ET Markets, ahead of your CAMS application, as an example, right? So yeah, I think we've done fine for now, but and it's early days, but huge ambitions over the next few years.
Right. I wanted to ask you this question about the Times Group. I mean, I respect them. They're a terrific group. I think somewhere Vineet Jain possibly wanted to model Times Internet on the lines of Barry Diller's Interactive Corp, IAC, right? But outside of MX Player and some of the recent ones, it's been a lot of average. And given the state of below average execution in India, and slightly above average execution just gives you the edge. It's sort of not a great set of situation or a great situation to be in, because we essentially want players to sort of blaze the trail, really create awesome-ish products. I want to call, if we wanted to categorize a set of things, saying white glove products, right? That like you talked about. My wife and I often discuss many times. For instance, there's a lot of budget hotels that exist, right? So the Tata Group has a budget hotel chain called Ginger. And Ginger has been there for quite some time and they do business. And those hotels are not fancy. But when you take the luxury hotels of the Taj Group, they've been consistent. And when you go to the Ginger as well, they've been consistent. Now, they don't promise, but you get hot water, the room is clean, every switch works, the coffee kettle works, the television turns on, the basics work. But when you see the rest of the landscape, it is always a fluctuating, it is always very up and downish, isn't it? So in one room, something works, something else doesn't work. You have a bad experience today, you have a good experience tomorrow. And if the employee or the manager at that point in time decided to take a personal interest, then you have a great outcome. And the standardization and the lack of systems or the presence of it doesn't seem to be creating outcomes at all, right? So therefore, looks like you've learned, or rather you bring that thinking saying, no, I want the output to be consistent. I want the customer to have a great experience every time, and it has to be the same every time they do it. It shouldn't be up and down. And therefore, you brought all of that thinking to IndWealth, and you provide a great user experience. You provide one window and one view of all the investments. Where does AI and ML come in here? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no. So many areas. I can give you a few examples. So the first very important area where AI and ML comes in is on people's allocation. So so people's allocation, by the way, that's the crux. So if you really look at it, a lot of Indians have been investing since the last 8 years, and they typically run a SIP.
Right.
SIP runs 100% equity, even though that person may be conservative. And then when there is a crisis or something goes bad, the person redeems. So if you look at many people, if you were to just look at the data, large data, and you were to look at people don't make money. The other is people don't make money in stocks. That's the reality. But they keep going back. They keep going back. So one of the areas where the default area where machine learning is used for us is to help people's risk score, which is driven by lots of data science, and to help people asset allocate. Because typically we believe that asset allocation and risk scores are not stagnant. They are constantly changing over a longer period of time. And machine learning plays a very important role. So as an example, let's say you have 100 rupees today or 1,000 rupees today, and you are a aggressive person. A static model will tell you to put 80 rupees in equity and 20 rupees in debt. Whereas our machine learning system will tell you 80 and 20 is your ideal. We'll get to that at some point of time. But today we don't want you to put 80 rupees in equity because of thousands of reasons, right? And hence do one thing, you park 70 rupees actually in cash or cash equivalent, which will give you 5-6%. Keep it ready, put 10 rupees in equity as an example. So machine learning plays a very important role here to ensure that it is intersecting your risk with the learning it's having for you, about you, and also the learning that it is having from the markets. Of course, our aim is not to say, buy this stock and tomorrow it'll go up. That's just, that data is not enough for anyone to do that, right? But over longer periods, our aim is to ensure that we allocate you properly, because that itself is completely incorrect. Okay. So that's one area. The second area is that we do a lot of index and fund scoring through machine learning. And that scoring is driven by how is the risk of a particular index or a fund or a product changing, which we call as a risk score. What is happening to the type of industries that particular product is invested in? What is happening what is the volatility score? What is the momentum score? And what is the fund manager score? So for example, if there is a mutual fund which is managed by a fund manager, if that fund manager is spread thin or if that fund manager exits, that he will get a particular score, and that system is learning all the time and balancing these scores. So which is why we are able to help people to do the right kind of rebalancing, right? So let's say if you are on a duration-based fund, or if you're on a fund which is not performing, not just in terms of returns, but in terms of all these scores, taking into account your exit loads and capital gains, it will switch you to the adequate product. So that's the other area where we use machine learning. The third area is that, which we are still kind of building, is your entire financial plan. It will be done completely automatically without asking you anything, and that will be completely ML based, which basically forecasts your future expenses. It forecasts your income based on your profile without asking you anything, by the way. I mean, one of the key learnings for us is don't ask people too many things. Human being is lazy. We need to give things on in the platter to the users. So there are several such areas, expenses, for example, expense categorization. So several such areas, actually a lot of things that we do by default, like the way our system is able to read PDFs at scale, whether it's a stock statement, mutual fund statement, etc., is all machine learning based. So that, because we can't do that if it was just like an OCR based thing, it can't be done at scale. So I think a lot of stuff that we do has ML intersected in it.
Interesting. So, Nassim Nicholas Taleb talks about two concepts, which is the black swan and the anti-fragile aspect of models, right? While he's now very skillfully and very rightly so extrapolated that to a lot of things. If you see in the Indian context over the last 5 years, we've had multiple deliberate economic disruptions, right? These are not a natural outgrowth of, like what happens in the US, where you have a boom and bust cycle purely because of the policies of the Fed and the US government. The manner in which at some point in time Congress or Senate takes a decision that today we decide that the American dream is going to include Medicare for everybody over 65, right? Now that creates a huge dent in the way markets are managed. It creates a whole new set of winners on the healthcare space and a whole host of other people. But in the Indian context, we've gone down the path of, in some sense, not even creative destruction, in some sense maybe destructive destruction, with demonetization. And for me, GST I think is sort of a long-term game. I don't really see that as an economic disruptor. At some point in time, you need one version of these things, and then eventually our pretense that we are the largest growing economy in the world, and our foolhardy intervention in last year's budget, saying that, let's just, go. These guys seem to be having a privileged life, so let's just go after them. And then this year's, 3-month long lockdown. So these, I personally call these deliberate economic disruptions, because it feels like a handful of people can know. And what it has actually done is, it has reversed, a lot of wealth creation at certain points in time. The market is up again as we speak today. It seems to be rescaling its peak back to what it was in Jan 2020, early 2020. But in the process, if you look at a lot of fund manager performance as well, these deliberate economic disruptions in many cases has wiped out 90-95% of fund managers' performances, right? A lot of funds have seen their 5-year averages or even 10-year averages dwindle down into single digits, and we don't know what else is going to come out of the banking sector consolidation, because when I see the number of NPS, even very small tiny banks seem to be sitting on piles of NPS. So the system, I don't think has gone through the worst shock of it yet. While all of these are deliberate shocks, I think the outgrowth of all the hubris that we had in the early 2010s, we are still yet to see that. Now, in that kind of a scenario, where there are a couple of potential black swan events that can happen, what can an AI or an ML engine truly anticipate that. It's commendable what you were able to do with the Franklin, crisis. But how do you model for these things? And because ultimately, many times in Indian investing, it feels like it's the Wild West, right? And not a day passes before we see, for example, the Syntex Tank, family has defaulted and thousands of crores of loans. And then notwithstanding that, they have such wide franchise. Now, given so many managements are suspect, and given there are economic disruptions, how does it feels like humans cannot fathom that this can happen? Can AI ML make a difference? If so, is that something that you're building for?
See, some of the stuff humans can, and would love to hear from Amrita also. Some of the stuff actually, so if you really look at it, there's a lot of focus on people to keep analyzing equity markets. But actually, what one misses is that one misses the debt side of the market, right? Where companies are taking loans or companies are being given loans, right? At the end of the day.
Right.
And one of the things that we obsessively monitor, and we can't do it humanly, our data systems monitor, is who is missing payments.
Right.
Who is missing payments, and we're doing it really fast, ingesting that information, which company is missing the payment, right? That information comes from multiple sources. I'm giving a little bit of secret sauce, but I mean, this can be done, right? At the end of the day, it cannot be rocket science what we're doing either. So we are actually monitoring a lot of, besides the normal fundamentals, what is the PE, what is the how expensive is the market, growth, momentum, etc., etc. We're looking at all of that. But the other thing that we're looking at more obsessively, which we feel at the end of the day, is to protect people's money, right? Destruction of money is worse, right? Is to see what are the probabilities of default by companies. What is the health and what is the probability of default? That's what our ML does. And the minute it breaches, that's the minute that impacts the equity, that impacts debt, that impacts everything. And bigger it is, bigger the problem, right? So that's really what we really pay a lot of attention on, very, very aggressively, besides looking at, what are the key technicals of every company, which everybody is doing, and, how's the promoter shareholding changing? Which mutual fund is selling and buying? So lots of those thousands of signals we ingest besides the normal. But one of the things that we do very differently is we monitor every company and see that which company is beginning to behave badly, right? Because when a company is about to, when the company delays, there is a screw up. That's where, so we got a feature on our product called IND Protect. It goes only to prime users, right? That's where the user sees red flag, okay? Now, obviously, when we were newer 6 months ago, people didn't believe us, right? So we had to kind of send them alerts, etc. But now people are beginning to believe us. So I don't think AI and ML can predict black swans,
right?
As such, we can do something, but we can definitely figure out that the systems can definitely figure out that, listen, at what point of time, even an aggressive user needs to be conservative. For example, our systems will never ask you to get into dynamic duration debt ever right now, or short or long-term debt, right? Because of so much of volatility, right? Our system will not ask you to for that 1% extra to go to a single A-rated buy a single A-rated bond or a debt paper, right? For example, I don't know what the situation is, but if I'm a consumer, our system will also not ask you to go all into equity right now. It'll kind of ask you to just hang in tight. Things don't look good, right? That's what the system is saying. Right. Hang in tight. Things don't look good, or they look flaky right now. So let's park your money into safe places so that you're at least in line with inflation. And that's what is great about a system like ours, because we monetize ourselves from users and not from fund managers and AMCs, right?
Your incentives are not misaligned.
Correct.
And see, from where the industry is today, right? This is still a step forward, right? So like you said, that there's so much happening, what can AI and ML do? But at the end of the day, data is a way stronger basis to take your decision on investments than someone's gut feeling. Like you said, the hotel manager decides that the rooms will be all okay. And here we are using data to bring in consistency in telling you what is cheaper, what is expensive. So depending on banks' NPAs, for example, right, and where the value of the stock of that bank is, I can still tell you whether it's cheap or expensive, right? And there is a lot of such examples. So even though what we are doing might not be foolproof, but at least it's a big step forward to what is happening currently in the market. Like when I was a banker, if a customer would ask me, listen, this fund is not performing, should I buy or sell, or what do I do? So should I sell or should I buy more, right? I would typically go back, talk to the fund manager, understand a few more things, understand what the other guys are doing, and go back and tell him a decision, right? But here today, I don't do the same, right? I have a lot of data to back me to say that, listen, this is how it is. These are the scoring. These are the underlying, and this is how the overall PE is, and this is the fund manager capability, and this is how. So there is a lot more confidence in the solution than it's earlier.
Yeah, I was not, obviously, by definition, a black swan is something we can't predict. So any system, whether it is AI or ML, obviously cannot predict 1A when the next black swan is going to be and what is it going to be about, right? We tend to think that a black swan can only be an economic disruption event. COVID, it is an economic disruptor, but in itself, it is not an economic disruptor, but it is actually a health crisis, right? So we don't know if the next conflagration with China is going to be an economic disruptor. But what I was referring to was, given the frequency with which these seem to be happening, is there a certain degree of weightage that is given into the modeling? That is because even with corporate debt, last year we saw a collapse of the debt market, right? A lot of A-rated companies' debt was all suspect, and the complicit nature of even the rating agencies in terms of what had happened behind the scenes was coming out into the light. And even today, the impact of the infrastructure leasing and financial services crisis hasn't been completely felt in the country, right? So Lakshmi Vilas Bank, which was recently acquired by DBS, is at the long tail of the IL&FS crisis. It is not even in the middle of it. And we haven't yet seen the mayhem that has unfolded. So I was speaking more about, and funny thing is, truth be told, I was an investor in Lakshmi Vilas Bank from the age I was 16. My mom gave it to me when I was a minor, and I saw 132,000 rupees of share capital wiped out last week because the RBI and DBS decided that share capital will be written down to zero. There was a lot of speculative interest that was going on in the stock. So your early warning systems.
So like Lakshmi Vilas, our engine would have like 6 months ago, it would have started alerting, right? Because there would be payments missing happening and all of that. So that's actually where ML is being used is probability kya hai default ki, right? But where the fact that even you can, if you are to pull data feeds, even you can figure out that which are the funny actors in the country, right? And that's exactly what we do. We look at every company and see which are the funny actors, and then the ML system, because we don't want to, we want that to be learning, right? Essentially, right. The ML system says there's a high probability of default, and then you get an alert, and then there's mayhem in our company because then customers start calling, and then there's craziness which happens.
Because see, most Indian debt investors, they are not there to trade in bonds. They want their capital safety, and they want these alerts way before the defaults happen. So if the system can give them these on time, then it's So and it's all connected, right? The bond market is connected, so it's all connected. So the point I was trying to say is that from our point of view, it's the key is that we want to monitor companies. There could be times where there's suddenly some other kind of a shock comes out because of some huge aspect which does not come into data feeds, for example. Right. But definitely, I think we've seen over the last 1.5 years that we've been quite, like Vodafone, etc. We've been quite, it's been quite basic. But we've got validation of the model. We got the validation of the model. And the only thing is that, listen, our engine will never give you 9% on debt, right? It'll say take conservative returns. But so be it. And that education needs to be done. That, listen, debt, you don't take risk, right? You're not supposed to take risk.
What's been the biggest challenge till now growing to where you've grown?
So I think for us, I think for us, the challenge has been when we started this business, we thought that this business is for ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals of the country. That's how we kind of orchestrated, and we had this which is why we launched our iOS app before the Android app. And, we had throttling, you have to apply for membership, etc. But what we learned is that this problem is not just for ultra high net worth families. It is also for the I would say the mass affluent of the country. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is what has really happened, that we've attracted a large number of those users. So we've had to reorchestrate the product, which is why we kind of rebranded, and we said we have a wealth positioning and we have the InMoney, the Super Money app. Okay, so that evolution has been obviously challenging. I won't call it a pivot per se, but the fact that it's now more broad-based. So we have these membership tiers. So platinum is for the rich people, HNIs, and then we have the gold membership tier, and then the blue is for free usage. So I think that orchestration has been obviously challenging, because each customer segment requires very different kind of servicing levels. So I think that's been a challenge. Building a team, despite having so much of experience, has been a challenge, right? It's not easy. But building a team, getting the right people in the right place, that's taken me time. It's not been like, done in a month's time. And that's a constant evolution and constant ongoing process.
Yeah, I think talent and...
I'll come to the talent part in a second. If Ashish Kashyap says he's finding it tough to build a team, then what has to become for the rest of the people in the country, the rest of the founders, right? But 6 co-founders. Isn't it? You're 6 co-founders, aren't you?
Not. I think no, not that. That's incorrectly.
That's what TechCrunch says about you.
Yeah. No, that's incorrectly. No, so it's basically Amrita and me, and then we have a few founding members in the company. So yeah, that's the way it's positioned.
Okay, so let's talk about the talent acquisition part. I did want to complete that growth. So on the one part, so then first class, business class, coach class. So that's essentially how, I mean, if I
but a good coach class.
Good
right?
coach class.
So yeah, good coach.
The ginger.
Yeah.
I always say, flying coach is like flying cattle, right? So you literally...
So not a cattle class at all. I would call it executive class, business class, and first class.
First class.
Executive, business, and first class.
Yeah. No, what I was just saying was, given the nature of the mass, so coach class consumers are not just big in number, servicing them can be servicing mass, especially in the Indian context. They come in all shapes and sizes. That is possibly what's proving to be a challenge.
That's a challenge for us, because we had to orchestrate that very quickly, right? And we suddenly grew, and we had to put that overnight, that whole system.
See, even then, I think the kind of services that a blue category or a gold category is getting today, right? That is something that is only available to the ultra HNI, the entire family office service. Right. That is what I think technology...
So that's what that technology has made it accessible suddenly.
Yes.
Right.
Technology has made it accessible to truly get advisory at scale.
Right. Yes. Right.
And yeah, go ahead.
Go on.
No, that's...
So let's talk about the talent acquisition part. I find it hard to believe that you're having trouble. You should be, given your streak and given the hypothesis that you're working on, this is an exciting space. And the beauty of it is, unlike all the other systems, a lot of what you do in the other sectors are heavily dependent on what I call as the last mile problem in India, right? If we were to really look at Indian personnel, right? We have a lot of things. So for instance, you could have a world-class nuclear reactor, but the last mile delivery is still done by local electric supply units, which are still largely pseudo government or maybe completely government, where things are very unreliable, right? So a lot of startups actually get bogged down, and rightfully so, because the entire ecosystem is like that. Finance is one such sector where there is a good degree of technology intervention that has happened, and therefore you are able to deliver. Now the only fundamental difference is there exists these systems and frameworks that you can leverage to deliver superior outcomes, which would mean that you're in a league of your own to be able to not just offer services and products, but also attract good talent for them. So I find it a little surprising. So talk to me about the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge really is that, once we knew earlier this year that the product market fit is there, we decided that time to invest, time to build a team. So, and as we are building the team, we also had the pandemic strike us, right? So while pandemic is on, we are trying to hire and onboard people, get them into the organization philosophy, culture. Engineers don't know finance, right? They need to get some context of finance. I mean, we need to make it simple. So from that point of view, yeah, I think it's not been a piece of cake. And remember, India is right now flooded with private equity capital, just flooded, right? And as a result, that there is, for fintech, there is a larger demand than supply of talent, especially engineering, data science, machine learning. So I wouldn't say that it's trivial. It is the hardest, right? So just to give you a context, today's date, let's say if you or I am hiring a software engineer who's interviewing or speaking to me as a company, that software engineer who's exiting has 5 offers in his hand.
Sure.
So if I give the first offer to him, he will most likely not join. And this is something it took me also a little while to understand, because he would have another 4 people outbidding my offer, right? So the market is madness, right? So if you work for software services, nobody looks at you. You work for some XYZ Arbit software services company. But if you are in a consumer-facing fintech company, what is a recruiter searching for? Fintech in Gurgaon, fintech in Bangalore. We come up, right? And then our people get attacked, right? So even from a retention perspective and from a talent acquisition perspective. So I think there is a bit of, I had actually thought that, there will be some softening during the pandemic, but the amplitude increased by 10 times. Because I think everybody thought it's an opportunity, chalo hire karte hain. Everybody thought. So I would say that it's not been a piece of cake building a team. And building a team just doesn't mean hiring, right? Building a team means bringing them on board, onboarding them, getting them to naturally believe without indoctrination, naturally believe the core problem with the company solving, the product and services which the company is giving is really solving a core issue, getting them to participate, getting them to get that first small win and participate in impact creation, that cycle, right? So to go through that cycle, right? It's not just about hiring, but it's hiring, building the team, getting them passionate about what they do, getting them excited. That's a task, right? I mean, it's not a trivial thing.
Sure, absolutely. No mean task. You can never be too prepared for something like that, right? So while the IC chip or the computer chip has grown at the speed of Moore's law, human brains haven't grown at the same speed. So it has grown in speed, but not at that much. You just sort of in a passing mention, you said early this year when product market fit was evident. Talk about that moment a little bit where you felt you had achieved product market fit and why you felt you had achieved product market fit.
I mean, I think simple. So number one is that we saw that in the early days of our product, there was a lot of chatter about us on Twitter, lots of chatter. And it was clearly evident that we were delivering something valuable to consumers. And there was also very, very passionate reviews on the app stores, on the Play Store and the iOS stores. A lot of chatter on LinkedIn. So a lot of chatter on these media vehicles. And the fact that if we were to do something erroneous, the consumers would really get annoyed and write to us aggressively. Remember, the top of the funnel of our app is free, right? I mean, tracking your money is a free service, right? And free service, if it's making a little error, typically consumers should uninstall, run away, right?
Yeah.
But here the people would be like really like passionate about it.
Right.
It gets solved or not. So we learned a lot from the users. Every day we continue to learn. I mean, my philosophy has been that what you want in early days is few people to love you than lots of people to be indifferent about you.
True.
So we had that power user base without giving any incentives or without any marketing money. They came to us and derived value and loved us.
Yeah,
so amount of times I actually shared with the team the word love.
Yes.
Comes when people talk about us. I love this and I love that and I love this about this. I love this nudge which it made, right? So I think that's the time when we realized that, look, what we are delivering to this set of consumers is very, very valuable. The use cases easily are being spelled out by the consumers, the future use cases. The current use case, people are seeing a lot of value. And that's the time we decided that, listen, let's double down, right? In fact, we kind of started seeing that pattern, right? When we got in Tiger, Dragon, and rest of the investors, right? So we started seeing that pattern and we said, look, consumer internet is going to be a long journey. There are unknowns. Partners are willing to sign up with us, so we should sign them up. We shouldn't waste the money still. It's not that we started doing TV ads after raising capital. We needed to achieve PFM and then get to the product to the next level and then say, how do we scale this to multiples or millions of people?
Despite so many of our features being WIP, there were signups which were happening. We've had some of the very large family offices come to us, tell us more and give us feedback, build with us. So those kind of validation are huge to say that we're on right track.
So Amrita, 2 years down the line, from the hypothesis that Ashish presented initially with you, seems like while 2 years seems a very short period, it already feels like a wild ride to me. Product market fit and this degree of scale. What does it look from your vantage point or your point of view? Has it already been like a dream run, or you think it's still ahead of you?
No, see, honestly, I think me and Ashish, we discuss this very often, that when we were discussing, we didn't imagine the scope to be so big. And, so it's turned out to be a much wider and bigger scope for us and not just wealth management. So that is something that I definitely learned in the last 2 years. But of course, it's been very, very exciting. Working with Ashish itself, you learn so much. And like I said, I think my confidence was the fact that, even if we fail in doing something, I knew that we will course correct. Because, it's at least we know what's happening, where are the problems, where is it fragmented, and what is required. In fact, a lot of my clients really like the platform so much also because it's built from the perspective of a client issues, right? Which is Ashish. So, from that point of view, I think we did a lot of things which other users were not even thinking.
So it looks like between the two of you, you figured out a phenomenal working equation. I see a great deal of mutual respect for each other. How did that happen? Did you both know each other prior to IndWealth, or how did this come about?
So I've known Amrita for 12 years. So I basically started Ibibo and she was the banker at HSBC. So I've known her since that day. So obviously, and she's the one who kind of encouraged me to get into wealth tech, right? That, listen, there's a problem. The other thing that we do is we divide and conquer. So I focus on product tech. She focuses on the customer side of the business, the servicing side of the business, the advisory side of the business, the acquisition of the large enterprise side of the business. So that's what Amrita focuses on. I focus on ensuring that I produce a good product, good system for her to be able to market it.
Yeah, see, one of our biggest apprehensions was that will a consumer pay a separate check for advisory, right? Because most of the users today are so used to inbuilt charges that they don't even know, even if they're paying very steep charges. So that was another thing I think we is very easy, because customer at the end of the day understands that this is the expense he's incurring and this is the value he's deriving. So
I think a lot of that is education as well, right, Amrita? For instance, in the US, John Bogle started Vanguard because he was so fed up with the amount of money that was just being charged with fund managers. I remember way back in 2012, I went to a Chase Bank just to deposit a check. And there was this lady. At that point in time, I had about $100,000 in my bank account because we were just contemplating making a down payment on a home. And this lady told me, we should do some investing. I said, great. What do you think we should do? Oh, you'll have to come down for a session for that. I said, okay, no, give me an inkling of what you're going to do. She said, this is not a very large amount of money. You should just put it in T-bills. Okay. And then I'll tell you how you should structure it. I said, okay, what's your commission going to be? She said 3%. I said, you got to be kidding me.
On a T-bill.
You're going to charge me 3% and you're going to tell me I have to invest in a T-bill, and you're actually charging me for that advice, right? So now that is double damaging, right? But in the Indian context, so the last few years, what I've seen is a lot of bad advisory, right? Yes. Especially banks, in the pressure to actually make margins, have recommended ULIP products extensively, which have eroded wealth in the first 3 years. These are so front-loaded for agent commission that there is no transparency in the information that is actually presented. Even the 15-day free look period that the IRDA mandatorily offers doesn't really do justice, because there's no, like the cigarette packet comes with a cautionary advice. There is no piece of cautionary advice that actually comes on any of these products, right?
Yeah, true.
Right. So looks like what you're alluding to is that a lot of that information that you're providing is actually valuable, and I'm sure the Indian market is not that wide compared to other markets out there, but it's still healthy. A great degree of participation. But what I think, it's just a personal gripe of mine. At some point in time, company managements today, still accounting is opaque. A lot of accounting is opaque. And given the lack of quality amongst Indian companies and the degree of money that is there in the system, there is a lot of overvaluation that is in the market. As I tend to take somewhere between an aggressive and a conservative stance. If it is all good quality, clean managements, I can understand. I know, again, we are going into the equity side of things. I'm sure at some point in time, I've always fantasized about this product, which would, let's say, for discussion's sake, Havells. We take Havells, and using AI and ML, this product hears and reads through all the press releases and all the interviews of the founders and various officers, and then somewhere, points a gap, saying that dal mein kuch kala hai. So therefore, be wary of Havells stock. It's a great company. I've read their story and all of that, but I'm just using that as an example. When that kind of information can happen, I think two things will happen: deepening of the market per se. A lot of cleaner management. There'll be incentive to be a clean management, and second, there'll be much more diverse companies. I think maybe you'll ride that wave. Looks like you're just at the beginning of it. So what's in store for the next 3-4 years, Amrita, if I may ask you?
I think we definitely want to scale now in a big way. Like Ashish was saying, that we have product validation, we have a lot of customer validation. Typically any customer who don't like you, they leave, but the fact that they come back, give us feedback for us to solve it. And so that is something that we would definitely do in the next few years. We are launching many more features on the application. So yeah, I think it'll be, that is.
Yeah, I think one, as I totally agree with Amrita, scale, that's the first now focus for us, because scale brings with it lots of benefits. And interestingly, I think we are well poised to scale. One metric that I shared with you was like the kind of app usage and app ranking we have. The second is also simplicity. The one thing that, the one thing as we go into the mass affluent, we already have HNIs and UHNIs. As we get that audience, making the system super simple, trivial, with clear, easy communication and education. That's one thing which we want to do. And a product like ours can do that. Like you see something else and somebody else sees something else, right? It's already very personalized, but even more personalized. Like, for example, you should see perhaps a millennial wouldn't have AIFs as an example, as an exposure class, or somebody who's 22-year-old shouldn't see retirement, but you or me should see retirement, right? So those are things which we want to definitely do, make it super, super personalized. I think the good news is that we've built a very good foundation. I'm very excited. In terms of technology complexity, it's 10x of GoIbibo. I can say this in public, but we are very happy with the foundation that we've set up.
Will you go international at some point in time?
Totally.
I would love to, right? I took the red bus business, and that's one of my unfinished businesses, right? I took the red bus business to multiple markets.
Yeah. See, I told you the scope is way bigger than what we thought.
We've been looking at it, right? What resembles us, right? So there's a Mint which does tracking but does not do the advisory. There's somebody who does advisory but not the tracking of financial life.
We already have customers from all over the globe.
As a non-resident.
As a non-resident customer.
Right.
So,
awesome.
So yeah.
Terrific, Ashish, Amrita. It was a little bit of an eclectic conversation, not with a chronology that we usually follow, but I'm glad we've covered and touched upon multiple topics. I know you guys are going to scale newer peaks in the days to come and the years to come. Maharajas of Scale will come back and talk to you when you are at a new peak and a new summit to see what that vantage point looks like. Any closing comments before we sign off?
No, I've enjoyed this conversation. It's helped me to actually reflect. Ever you don't do these things
Went
often.
Back to memory.
Like I actually reflected and thought about it. I think I should do some memoirs.
We should come back and still do a specific GoIbibo episode. Maybe you said that's a good story. We should talk about that.
No, I mean that's very exciting. Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. We wish you the very best, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this story. If this story made a difference to you, tell us by leaving a comment on the website or our social media channels. Help us spread the love by subscribing, liking, and sharing our show. We welcome speaker suggestions and collaboration. Write to me at tanya@maharajasofscale.com.